Hey everyone, I'm Kevin Bartlett.
And I'm Christine Strauss, and this is The Real Deal with Baird Warner, where we cover all things real estate.
For buyers, sellers, renters, investors, and fellow agents. Before we get into our guest today, we're going to take a quick look at the market activity over the weekend. On the list side, we saw inventory drop for the second straight week. Not a sign that we'd like to see. Obviously, we'd like to see more inventory out there. We're about 2/3 of the inventory that we had on the market last year at the same weekend.
Absolutely, and on the buy side, we saw that activity jump way back up. The numbers were much higher than what they were this time last year. So today we have Frank Pissarro as our featured guest. Thank you, Frank, for joining us today.
Coming.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate that. So Frank says he's been in the business for far too long, and he is our go-to rental guru for here at the Naperville Baird Warner office. So let's dive right into what Frank has to share with us today.
Yeah, we thought with today's climate, we thought it would be a great opportunity to discuss fair housing in the real estate industry and what that means and who's protected and what kind of protections are out there. So.
Sure.
I guess we'll start just at the top. What is fair housing? What are fair housing laws?
Sure. So with fair housing, I mean, the true definition is that it's designed to protect people from discrimination when they're either renting or buying a home, getting a mortgage, seeking housing assistance, or engaging in other housing-related activities. And so there's really three categories to break it down.
Okay.
The first one being the federal Fair Housing Act, and that is where it covers race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status, and disability. And then we get into the state run fair housing, which is age, ancestry, marital status, military status, unfavorable military discharge, sexual orientation and gender identity, and then order of protection status. And then to break it down even further on the local level, we've got Chicago, Cook County, and then we have Naperville. And with Chicago, Cook County, the new one that everybody's talking about that went into effect in January is the Just Housing Ordinance. Mm-hmm. And then what affects both Cook County, Chicago, and Naperville is legal source of income, which has to do with the Housing Authority voucher program,
okay,
and where you cannot discriminate against those types of tenants.
Sure.
So we don't really see, while I know that it exists, we haven't seen a lot of discrimination issues come into play in the sales arena. Mm-hmm. It's more so in the rental arena.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not to say that there's probably not any.
No.
But definitely more prevalent in the rental.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
Absolutely. And so with keeping all of those points in mind, and we're looking at everyone who is protected and all of those pieces coming into play, so why is it so important to have things like our fair housing rules and make sure that we're covering all of that?
Just the bottom line really is that you should treat everybody the same. Mm-hmm. As long as you treat everybody the same, you're going to keep yourself out of trouble.
Right.
You
sure.
know, I mean, just if what you do for one, you should do for all, and you have to remain consistent.
Could you give us an example of what you're talking about in terms of a realtor doing the same thing for one client as they would do for another?
You should have some type of a procedure put in place. You know, if we're talking about rentals, what qualifications are you going to use to put that tenant, to approve that tenant for that piece of housing? And so what does that look like? You know, some focus on credit. There's also background checks that are done. Some will verify employment. Maybe you want to check with the previous landlord to see how the tenant paid their rent and how they treated the property. Some do identity. So I mean, there's all of those things. So whatever is important to you, either as the landlord mm-hmm. or as the realtor who's helping that landlord and guiding them through that process, you want to have it outlined and make sure that whatever you do for one, you're doing the same thing. You're not skipping any steps.
Gotcha.
And you're trying to evaluate that individual on a set criteria.
Sure.
And not really deviating off of it.
Right.
You know, so that's really what it boils down to, is that you want to focus on keeping every the way that you treat people the same way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we
Got
focus. I can tell you from our experience, we focus on one thing, and that is green. Show
Right.
me the money. Show me
Makes
the
sense.
money. Okay, so everything that we do is financially based.
Mm-hmm.
So we use ratios to qualify tenants and so forth, and that's what we utilize to say, okay, you know, credit score only tells one part of the story, and so. You know, I don't put a lot of stock in that. There's too many people out there that have suffered something in their life, whether it's job loss. I mean, speaking of, you know, COVID right now, job loss is pretty prevalent.
Things happen.
Things
That's
happen,
true.
right? And so if you can kind of see past that and say, okay, well, how long ago was it? When did it happen? And so forth. You may end up with a very good tenant. I mean, all it is trying to protect the owner's risk in that. You know,
Right.
So fair housing comes into play where, again, you want to treat everybody the same and make sure that you're going through the same process for each and every person. That's most important.
Okay. I was going to ask you a little bit about the different classes that are protected. I know you went through
Sure.
federal, state, and local.
Right.
Just looking at the state, so is the ones that you listed just for Illinois, or is
Yes.
that every state? So each state will have their own different.
Each state may have their own, exactly.
And then on top of that, the local can each
The
have.
local
Okay.
can drill it down even further.
Okay.
I mean, Cook County, Chicago is a great example of that with this just housing ordinance that came into play in January. And so there's been lots of conversation about criminal background and what does that look like.
Right.
All right. And now look, Illinois made marijuana legal as of January 1st. So, you know, Cook County said the just housing ordinance is just that. They want to make sure that everybody is entitled to housing. And so how do you get past that? And so they put criteria in place to say, okay, you know, yes, you're going to go through your process and you have to approve a tenant based on financials and whatever other qualifications before you get to the criminal background. Now, after you have approved the tenant, say, next step, we're going to process your criminal background. Anything that's older than 3 years is off the table with the exception of sex offender.
Okay.
And so and what they're trying to get to was, how does someone's criminal activity really affect their ability to pay rent?
Yep.
Sure.
You know, I mean, I understand it. People look at things very differently, and you know, if they had a DUI or if they had a possession of marijuana back when they were, you know, in their early 20s, and now they're 40 years old and they're going to apply for a piece of property and it shows up on the report, should the landlord be able to decline that person? Well, how relevant was it?
Right.
What happened in that period of time between their 20s and where they are now?
Right.
You know, do they have a good paying job? Are they an upstanding citizen? Have they gotten past that little hiccup?
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Perfect sense.
And so that's what that just housing ordinance was trying to accomplish, because, you know, us as realtors, you see something come back on that criminal background check and you go,
Right.
oh, now we got a problem. Well, wait a sec. How old was it? When did it happen? What were the circumstances?
Right.
And that's what they're trying to get everybody to do, is look at a more individualized assessment and then
Sure.
put guidelines in place.
Okay.
Chicago's not the first one to do this.
I was going to ask, is there anywhere else in the
Oh,
state that's doing it? Or?
I don't believe that there's anywhere else in the state. Understand, you know, Illinois is very liberal, and so they have adapted some of the policies that other states have done. So I know that this happens in New York, in Minneapolis, in Minnesota. Minnesota has actually gone and for Minneapolis, St. Paul, they've even gone and said that you really can't look at a credit score the same way that you would before.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so the municipalities, everybody's concerned about affordable housing. And the push is to get everybody into some type of housing.
Right.
even in our wonderful, community of Naperville, they have had this big push for affordable housing for years. And they adopted in October of, I believe it was 2017 or 2018, with the legal source of income and the housing voucher, and saying that you can't just say no to that program.
Right.
You have to, if the property qualifies and the person qualifies, you have to allow that process to roll.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And these are all great points to think of. And I just want to jump back a little bit too. We were talking about, treating everyone the same. We look for green, all of that. So for some of our sellers, landlords, and even other realtors who are listening that can help their clients in that way, do you kind of have, maybe a list of do's and don'ts that you would advise for those potential landlords when they're, reviewing everything?
Well, with do's and don'ts, I mean, I'm a believer in trying to get as much information as I possibly can about that tenant. And if there was a hiccup or a financial, there's a financial blemish, try to get some more detail. What is, we encourage people to write letters, chronological order of events that got them to the spot that they're in.
Okay.
Maybe somebody was sick, maybe they went through a divorce, and it was just a blip, but it has had an effect on their credit. And it's not that you just want to discount it and say, oh, okay. The idea is that you want to look at that and say, all right, so they had this happen, maybe it was a year ago, 18 months ago. What steps have they now taken to bring things back? Can you see improvements? And really for landlords, it's all about risk. Right. And it's trying to minimize that risk. And so if you have a client, if you're a realtor and you're working with a prospective tenant and they say, oh, my credit's not so great, well, maybe you can start talking to them about other things that may help the landlord feel better about that situation. Right. And again, strictly financial, maybe they could do extra deposit. Maybe they could do prepaid rent. Sure. Maybe they could have a relative, family friend, be a guarantor, where they're covering the rent in case the tenant were to stumble. Sometimes you can play with the lease if you're allowed to, and maybe do something on a shorter term to try to see how the tenant is going to behave during that, financially behave with that.
Almost like a trial.
Almost like a trial,
yeah,
exactly.
Trial period.
And I'm not saying that one of those things is going to be the magic bullet or the silver bullet. Maybe it's a combination of those things. Maybe it is where you're going to do a short-term lease and you're going to do some extra deposit because the landlord's a little concerned about the financial situation. Sure. But ultimately, as long as you're doing the same thing and you're giving those same opportunities to others, there is no issue.
Okay. That seems like the most important part.
It's really the bottom line. I mean, it is treat everybody the same. Have a process in place, and you should stay out of trouble.
Okay.
That's perfect. Really great tips there. Well, Frank, we want to thank you so much for spending your time with us today and sharing your knowledge about the topic of fair housing. So we really appreciate that.
Thanks for making it in.
Yes,
very good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And so for our listeners, if they want to get in touch with you, if they have any follow-up questions, where can they reach you?
So here at the office is the best way. I'm here most days.
Okay.
And so most hours. That number would be 630-718-7526. 630-718-7526.
Perfect.
Any social media you want to push, or any website, or anywhere else they can find you? Hey, we want to get them to find you.
I understand. Well, we with the property management that we do for the company for Baird Warner, our website is Baird Warner Property MGMT.com.
And we'll have this out for everybody to see.
That's fine. And our criteria is listed there. So you're more than welcome to use that, tweak it, again, as long as you're staying consistent.
Absolutely.
That's the key.
Very good.
Thank you
so much,
All
Frank.
right.
We appreciate it.
And now a word from our Key Mortgage loan officers on our weekly Mortgage Minute.
Hi, this is Christy Gavoris with Key Mortgage. Today is July 14th, 2020, and this is your Mortgage Minute. There has never been a better time to buy a home. Interest rates are at historic lows, and you don't need to wait till you save 20% to be able to buy a house. The state of Illinois offers programs with as little as 1% down. Conventional loans start with as little as 3% down and FHA with 3.5% down. Why wait? Interest rates are great and they may not be this low for this long. People also ask me what can they do to improve the mortgage process and not make it so cumbersome. Ideally, you'd like to speak to your loan officer a good 2 to 3 months before you're ready to start your house hunt. Your loan officer can help guide you in getting your down payment money moved into one bank account instead of having it spread out over 3 or 4, and that can reduce the amount of documentation you need to provide to underwriting. You can also strategically make payments on certain credit cards to hopefully boost your credit score. And if you can boost your credit score 30, 40, 50 points, that can result in a lower interest rate, lower PMI, and a lower overall monthly payment. And if that payment is low enough, you might even be able to afford more house and expand your house search into houses you never thought you could afford. For more information, please give me a call at the number below or send me an email or a text. Once again, this is Christy Kavoris with Key Mortgage.
Thanks again for joining us. I'm Christine Strauss.
And I'm Kevin Bartlett. Catch us next time to hear about the real deal.